if you're ready to make that change, if you're like, this year is going to be different for me, or this fall, I should say, is going to be different for me, don't just think about it in this brief 3-month sprint to get to Thanksgiving. That's a great place to get started, and it's the perfect place to set a short-term goal. And that's going to get you going, and it's going to help build your momentum and a little bit of motivation. But remember, we want to focus on discipline versus motivation, because the discipline is going to stay. The motivation is fleeting.
Let's link up with Krysta on The Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's going on, Fix listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and I've got another solo episode for you guys for this week. And I have so many different topics I want to talk about. Took a couple minutes before hitting the record button to kind of organize my thoughts. Have been having some fantastic conversations with clients over the course of this week. The theme being, okay, it's September. It's a brand new month. It's when kids go back to school. Summer's officially over. We celebrated Labor Day as the last hurrah. We especially feel that around here at the Jersey Shore. And a lot of people are like, all right, it's time. Maybe the last couple of weeks weren't my quote unquote best self. Maybe I wasn't doing the absolute most that I could to get better results in a potentially faster timeline, or just be more committed to my fitness and nutrition goals. But now I'm ready. There's less socializing going on, maybe. Things are kind of pulling back a little bit, and it's just easier to make the best decisions possible. So I want to get into that topic a little bit, but I also have been thinking about the all or nothing mindset. And it's a topic that I've broached before on this podcast, but I'm going to tie it to fitness and a personal experience. If you've heard this already, if you work with me, you're probably tired of hearing about this story, but about a week ago, I had a little incident in the gym with a weight and my finger. I unfortunately had to get a couple stitches on my right hand and my middle finger. And while it was somewhat comical, also a little bit traumatic and not the best timing, I would say, all around. Not that it's ever a great time to get an injury. When it was happening, my first thought was, shit, I won't be able to work out. And I want to use that thought to talk about the all or nothing mindset, because obviously I was in a lot of pain. And for the first couple of days that I was dealing with this injury, it's on your hand. It's kind of a nuisance. I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to be in the gym. I won't be able to hit a workout. I can't grip a barbell. I can barely put, a couple weights in my hands, or, I'm going to have to go lighter. And that's not good enough. And that is the all or nothing mindset in a nutshell. I had two options. At least I thought I had two options. It was either only work out the way I wanted to, at the intensity I wanted to, with the weight that I wanted to, with the same equipment that I wanted to, that I was used to, or just not work out at all. I could do cardio. I could go for a walk. There are so many things that I'm going to sit here and list as potential other avenues that I could have explored and have since. But even as a coach, even as somebody who will preach this to their clients until she's blue in the face, I totally had that moment of, well, this sucks. Woe is me. And now I can't do something the way I want to do it. So I'm just not going to do it at all. And that shows up in nutrition in particular all the time. But I feel that it's really been heightened over the past couple of weeks because of the end of the summer, and because people feel like they're making these transitions from one routine to another. So to wrap my own personal story, I took a couple days off, and I also realized in that process, it was probably good timing. I initially said it was bad timing, but was probably good timing. I'd been working out consistently, pushing pretty heavy weight, really challenging myself in particular lately with my trainer, with my deadlift, my chest press, trying to keep going with my goals to increase my chin-ups. And I was feeling awesome in the gym. So I kind of felt like, this is a setback. I'm going to lose a little bit of momentum. And then I have to walk around with this big bandage on my hand. Instead, though, in a conversation with my own nutrition coach, she pointed out, hey, great time for a deload week, AKA why not pull back a little bit on the weight, rest, recover. I truthfully, as I always tend to battle with, was not getting enough sleep in the first place. So this was a good time to allow my body to rest. And frankly, maybe the universe decided that I needed to be forced to do that by having this little incident happen. So that was kind of step one of talking myself out of this all or nothing mindset. Rest is important. Rest is a part of the process in seeing results. The second part of it was really thinking about what else I could do. Just because I couldn't do something the same exact way I had been doing it before didn't mean there were no other options available to me. As I mentioned, I could have used different types of equipment, used different weight, things that were easier to pick up, put down, use machines. And honestly, I hit my first workout 2 days ago from the day I'm recording this. So 3 days ago from the day this episode goes live. And I really didn't have to actually modify as much as I thought, which I was pleasantly surprised about because I just thought about the way I work out. The structure was the same exact way, but I used my own body weight. I used kettlebells instead of dumbbells. I used different pieces of equipment. I played around with tools like and techniques like time under tension. For example, holding a push-up at the bottom for a little bit longer, or playing around with the tempo with which I lowered my chest down to the floor and then pressed it back up. All of those things can be effective in the way that we train. And while I don't really want this podcast episode to necessarily be a lesson in different ways that you can train, I really want it to go back to the mindset component and the fact that sometimes we just need that outside perspective. Because to be totally honest, I was apprehensive about working out on my own until I spent some time working out with my own trainer. And again, trying to humanize this as somebody who is a coach, who has the knowledge, I still needed that additional support for someone to say to me, hey, you got this and you can do this. And just help me kind of be creative about the different types of exercises or different machines that I could potentially use while I had this small limitation over the course of the next 2 weeks or so. And it took that one session, spending the hour with my amazing trainer, shout out to Krysta, I know she listens, and showing me, hey, we don't need to wrap our fingers around something, or why don't we just use this weight instead, or let me help you help yourself by passing you a weight. And sometimes it's those really little things, those small moments of somebody supporting you to be like, you got this, you can do it, and why don't you try it a different way? That's the power of working with a coach. That's the power of having somebody else give you the push, the permission, the credit, the thought to be able to think about something differently. And to tie that directly into the nutrition component, again, going back to this theme of it's September, I want to get back on the wagon, I want to get started again. I want to challenge anybody else out there who's having those thoughts to look at it a completely different way. Rather than say to yourself, oh, over the last 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, whatever timeline you want to count for the summer, I have not done enough, or I really have ignored my nutrition, or I haven't made the progress that I wanted to. Finish that sentence however you choose. To look at it in a different way and really audit yourself and ask yourself, did I make the best decisions in the moment with one, the information I had available to me? Did I make the best decisions with the food options that I had available to me, or the fitness options? Maybe you were traveling, you didn't have access to a gym. Did you still get a walk in? Did you get some recovery time in, like I just mentioned with my own situation? And using those wins and framing them up as wins as a way to assess whether you didn't make progress. Because we're really quick to be like, oh, well, I recently hired a coach and I started working with them in the last 6 to 8 weeks. Just had this exact conversation with somebody today. And I see the scale going up. So that must automatically mean that I didn't make progress. That's the all or nothing mindset kicking in. And that's where the reframe needs to come in. Instead of saying that you didn't make progress, maybe for you, the biggest focus that you needed to drill in on those 6 to 8 weeks was just looking at food in a different way, or thinking about making different choices when you went out to eat, or prioritizing your protein. That doesn't always reflect in immediate results on the scale at all. It just doesn't. But what it does reflect is a potential habit change. And what that habit change will do for you in the long run is so much more powerful than the 2 pounds you thought you were going to lose in XYZ timeline, or the 3 pounds, or the 2% body fat, or fitting into a certain outfit, or whatever it is. So when you think to yourself, okay, new month, back to school, it's the fall, it's that time to hit the reset button, I want you to really consider whether that's a fair assessment. And you know what? Maybe it is. Maybe you could be listening to this episode right now and you're like, I just didn't really care too much over the past couple of weeks or past few months, and now I'm ready to get back to it. But if that is you, I want you to really ask yourself going into the rest of this year, because we know the fall and winter will fly by and we'll be very quickly having conversations about what we want to accomplish in 2023, and think longer term and zoom out and take it a step further and say to yourself, okay, I'm auditing myself to note that right now, the way I feel is I could have done something differently. I kind of ignored these things that are actually important to me. Here I am again, feeling like I'm jumping back on this wagon, or I'm getting back into a routine that I quote unquote fell off of. So what can I do so that I do not wind up in this situation come September of 2023? Because we got to start thinking about that right now. And the reason why you have to start thinking about it right now is because we go through the same seasons and the same cycles every single year. And we're constantly talking about having to start over. And we're consistently talking about having to jump back into things. And that's where that reframe comes in. That's where the new approach, the new mindset can be so much more powerful, because we can look at some of the tools, which I am going to share over the course of the next few minutes, that we can use to get closer to our fitness and nutrition goals as a part of those seasons. And take a step back and understand that the goal doesn't always have to be weight loss. The goal doesn't always have to be fat loss. The goal doesn't always have to be a physical transformation. We're really driven by that because we constantly get that messaging on social media, in conversations with friends, hearing about this person who did this and that diet, people being complimented for their physique and being rewarded for those sorts of things. And that's not to say there's nothing wrong with having those goals. Where I think the stickiness comes in and the true challenge comes in is the timeline with which we want to reach those things, and us kind of letting go of all of the other priorities we have and saying, oh, well, I have to commit to this and I have to do this in XYZ timeline. Where instead, the clients that I work with, and I have several who have kind of come up on their 1-year anniversary of working with me, and so this conversation is top of mind for a few of them. The ones who are the most successful are able to look back on the past 12 months and, regardless of their progress or regardless of their weight, kind of take inventory of what habits they've changed and what progress they've made. Even if sometimes that continual momentum going forward was only a 4-month blip, because maybe in that 3 to 4 months, that was the timeline where they consistently started losing body fat. And then maybe holidays came into play. Then travel came into play. Then maybe they got a new job. Then maybe they were doing this and that. And all these other factors and all these other life events that are going to come up year after year paused things a little bit. But all it paused was the measurable progress on the scale, the measurable progress in the way they looked in progress pictures, or the measurable progress in the way a certain outfit fit. What it didn't pause was the new habits that they executed on a regular basis. So I want to share a couple of those. If, again, you are that person who's sitting here saying to yourself on a walk, listening to this podcast episode, wherever you are, thinking, okay, it's time for me to start. And I want to push you to show up as your best self today that will serve you next year and into the year after that and the year after that, because you owe it to yourself. And if you listen to my episode from 2 weeks ago, we talked about the fact that we're doing this for life either way. So you get to decide. You get to decide if you constantly want to play this game of jumping on, jumping back off, getting back into a routine, falling off that routine, or accepting that there's different approaches for different seasons and different phases of your life. And someone who really truly prioritizes their health and fitness for the long haul sees that, recognizes that, and whether that's on their own or with the support of a coach, comes up with a plan that supports that. Because at the end of the day, that's reality. And that's something that I hope to communicate in every single one of these episodes, in trying to be real and honest and authentic in everything that we do. I myself can use me and my own nutrition as a perfect example of this. For the first half of 2022, I was really dialed in on my goals. I had a certain timeline for a wedding that I was going to in the Dominican Republic, and I wanted to just feel my best up into that point, to that point by this certain date. And I was very happy with the progress that I made. And I'm very happy with the progress that I've made over this entire year and even the year before that, because I worked on my relationship with fitness. I worked on my relationship with food, and those things couldn't be measured by the scale. But at the same time, I'll also be really quick to admit that once I got to that end of May, it was right around Memorial Day, so the official kickoff of summer mark, I was way more relaxed about my nutrition. And there were definitely weeks where I would kind of go back and forth and say to myself, let me jump back into tracking again. Let me be a little more strict with this. Let me bring more self-awareness to that. And then there were other weeks where I was like, you know what? I'm good. I want to enjoy myself right now. But where I always checked myself was in understanding my expectations and understanding that I couldn't set unrealistic expectations if I wasn't actually putting the habits to work and using the tools that I had readily available to me, that I preach to other people to prioritize, to use on a regular basis. Because otherwise it's like, there's really not much you can say about it. It's, oh, I'm not happy with what I see in the scale. Okay, well, let's talk about what you've been doing over the last few weeks. There's that authenticity. There's that realness showing up. So a little bit of a tangent, but again, if you're ready to make that change, if you're like, this year is going to be different for me, or this fall, I should say, is going to be different for me, don't just think about it in this brief 3-month sprint to get to Thanksgiving. That's a great place to get started, and it's the perfect place to set a short-term goal. And that's going to get you going, and that's going to help build your momentum and a little bit of motivation. But remember, we want to focus on discipline versus motivation, because the discipline is going to stay. The motivation is fleeting. And we want to take whatever we do in these next 30, 40, 50, 60 days and be able to reapply it and adjust it based on whatever else may pop up in your personal life, in your professional life, what have you. So if that's you, and maybe you don't necessarily want to work with a coach, maybe you're not ready to work with a coach, or maybe you feel like there's something you need to do to get ready, which, by the way, there's nothing you need to do to get ready to work with a coach. And if any of this is resonating with you, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation about what the Fitness Fix is all about. And this will give you a little preview into exactly what that is. So there's 2 things you can do starting today that if you just do them for the next 30 days, it will set you up with more information to help you or a coach or somebody in your life guide you in making better decisions to get to where you want to go based on exactly where you are today. And what the heck do I mean by that? I'm going to give you those 2 examples. The first is commit to tracking your food in some way. Tracking your food brings awareness to exactly what you're consuming. And people can say up and down all day long, I don't want to track, it's tedious, it's that. It is the best way to really understand how to eat versus what to eat, because it's not always about the what. And the best way that I can describe that is by thinking about this. Anytime somebody asks me, oh, what's the best breakfast option? Oh, what's the best lunch option for me to eat? The answer always is it depends, because nothing happens in a vacuum and nothing happens. You don't just eat that one meal, hopefully, one meal a day. And even if you did, I'd have to then zoom out a little further and ask, well, what did you eat yesterday? What are you planning on eating tomorrow? If you start logging these things and you write it down, even without some expert opinion or the insight of a coach, you might start to be able to notice a few things about your eating habits, whether that's the timing of when you eat. Are you noticing that you tend to wait till the last minute to eat and that you feel like you're always hungry and then it becomes an emergency? That's a challenge in and of itself, regardless of what you're actually consuming. Are you really inconsistent with the amount of protein that you're having? Just start asking yourself these questions, and it's a lot easier to, 1, be honest with these answers, and 2, see them right in front of you when you put them on paper, if you want to do it the old school way, in a note on your phone, or what I like to use, apps like MyFitnessPal, My Macros Plus, Lose It, any of those. will totally work. With food tracking, I also want people to recognize that it doesn't have to be tedious because it doesn't have to be perfect. The more information you put, the better you can be informed to make new decisions and to make adjustments, but it doesn't have to be down to the exact gram or to the exact amount of food that you ate. If you at least estimate something, it's a whole lot better than nothing. And it allows you to remove your bias of what you think you ate or what you're trying to convince yourself you consumed in your journey to improve your health and your wellness. So that's one way to do things. The other part of tracking that's really helpful is it will give us an exact roadmap that puts you at a much more realistic starting line, because somebody could come to me, they could give me some information about what they weigh, how tall they are, their goals, the timeline they have for those goals, whatever. And I could give them a recommended set of calories and macros. And that will work. It's not to say that it won't work at all, but let's say, for example, that person needs to be eating about 150 grams of protein a day. They start tracking their food and they notice that they're barely getting 100. That is going to set them up for complete failure, because it is going to be very challenging to all of a sudden wake up the next day when they were typically consuming 100 grams and magically, boom, increase that to 150. Get another 50 grams of protein when maybe you don't even know what that looks like. So instead, we can slowly shift the goal line. And that initial starting point will be that much more accurate if it's based off of what you're currently consuming, and two, what you like to eat too. That's the other big thing. Anybody that I work with, I have them spend 7 days without any direction from me of purely tracking their food. And that's the exact reason why. It gives me insight into their preferences, but it also gives me insight into figuring out where the biggest gaps are and then tackling those first, because we don't need to make 72 changes at once to ultimately get to where we want to go. And having a foundation that's really realistic and rooted in exactly where you are right now today, and then slowly building on that foundation, is going to make this entire process seem that much easier. And who doesn't want this to be easier? Because it's not easy. I've heard coaches say before, my job isn't to make dieting easy, it's just to make it suck less, because there's an extent to this that totally sucks. Again, that's the reality. But if we can root it in your current reality, you will ultimately get there faster. The second piece of information that you could spend some time tracking over the next 30 days, and then even making adjustments to as well, is steps. Now, it doesn't have to be steps per se. It could just be your general workout activity. But a lot of coaches in the fitness space like the idea of tracking steps because it's very much tied to something called NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And we tend to burn more calories, we meaning all humans, burn more calories from that type of activity versus those organized exercise activities, like your appointments with your personal trainer, going to take classes, however it is that you like to work out. So let's say, for example, you're currently averaging, you track it even for a week, less than 30 days, and you notice that you're averaging about 5,000 steps a day. Again, because of my same reasoning for spending some time tracking your food without any guidance on specific numbers, I would have somebody track their steps without giving them any sort of goal. Here's the thing to keep in mind. It's all about, once again, shifting that goal line and what's going to make the biggest impact for you. If you're currently averaging 5,000 steps a day, there's no magic in saying, oh, everybody needs to get 10,000 steps a day. If you're averaging 5,000 and you can average 6,000, that moves the needle for you exactly where you are. And that will create an environment where you will see change. And that's what's most important. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. It doesn't matter what some quote unquote industry standard is. And again, capturing that information just ultimately allows us to make more informed decisions. So let's say you notice that you're, again, 5,000 steps. If you slowly increase it to 6,000, maybe you spend 1 week, okay, I'm going to shoot for 5,500. And then the next week, I'm going to shoot for 6. Not only will it be easier for you to make that happen, it's also mentally going to help you feel successful because you're going to get there by just increasing a little bit at a time and incrementally walking through the process. And again, accepting the fact that you're doing this for life. So 7 days of smaller progressions is not any worse than or any better in any kind of way than trying to make this really big progression virtually overnight. And frankly, I would argue that it's better because you're more likely to be successful with making that happen. There are so many other things we could start to pay attention to and measure and track, but really those two things alone, or if you want to take the step one in another direction, maybe you're measuring how many times you're getting to the gym. And this isn't to say, oh, you should go to the gym twice a day. And if you're going 6 days a week or 7 days a week, I would actually challenge you to maybe pull back. But that's a conversation for a different episode. But let's say you are doing some sort of activity. Maybe it's just 20 minutes of movement. Who cares about tracking your steps? Maybe you're committing to 20 minutes of movement 3 days a week, and that's what you've been doing currently. Why don't we bump it back up to 4 days a week or 30 minutes of movement 3 days a week and adding those extra 10 minutes? So that's just another way of looking at it. That's another way of gauging how much activity you have over the course of a daily basis and over the course of a week. But all that to say, just grabbing this information and collecting it and writing it down for some period of time will put you in a spot that can make you way more successful and also make you a lot happier, because you will start to see that you don't need to make these super dramatic changes in your life, and it'll just be more sustainable and it'll just be more doable. So think it over if those aren't things that you're currently doing. And if you're really asking yourself or really thinking to yourself, I'm ready to make a change, don't go from 0 to 360, because I can guarantee you that that will set you up for failure in the long run. Maybe it'll work for you for 4 weeks. And if it does, amazing. But you really need to be honest with you about whether you can sustain that for the long term. And usually the answer is no, because then you'll become that person who has that life event, that unanticipated thing, that travel, something comes up at work, personal life, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, this 360 that you created that you now want to maintain, you're going to convince yourself that it all has to go out the window. And if you've kind of fallen into that trap and you've been at this for a while, I would again encourage you to really audit yourself and focus on the positives first and ask yourself, okay, in the last year, in the last 6 months, in the last 3 months, even if I didn't get to a specific goal that I had set for myself, or even if I'm not seeing the progress as quickly as I wanted to, are there certain decisions I'm making? Are there certain habits? Or is there something in my routine that if I keep doing it, but maybe I increase it a little bit, or maybe I get more consistent with it? Maybe I'm tracking my food 4 days a week and I get to 7. Won't that get me to where I want to go? And the answer is yes, it will. It always will. And then pat yourself on the back for actually having established the habit for those 4 days or for those 5 days, because there's people out there who can barely do it for 2 or aren't even ready to be able to do it for 1. So that's all I got for you guys this week. Another quick episode. Going to keep rolling with these short episodes over the course of the next several weeks. I am excited to share that I'm upgrading my podcast space very soon. So stay tuned for some fun stuff and some exciting new guests that we have lined up into the end of September and October. And like I mentioned throughout this chat, if any of this resonated with you, if you're listening and thinking, I could get on the bandwagon with all of this, but maybe I need a little bit of support to do it, you know where to find me. Shoot me a DM on Instagram at either the Krysta Huber or over at the fix.officialpod. Would love to chat with you. Love to see how I might be able to support you. I have coaching spots open for September. Let's get started now. Let's develop these really solid habits going into the winter season, going into the holidays, so that you can feel confident well before January of 2023. Wherever you're listening from, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next episode.